It was early morning when I noticed the HOA inspector, Karen, striding toward my cabin, clipboard in hand and her usual scowl firmly in place. She didn't knock. She didn't ask politely. She just stood there, arms crossed, declaring in her sharpest tone, "This cabin is unsafe. You need to vacate immediately, or we'll take further action." I froze for a moment, not out of fear, but at the sheer absurdity. My cabin, which I had meticulously built and maintained for over a decade, had never failed an inspection. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss how Karen's confidence came crashing down. Our life at the cabin had always been peaceful. Nestled in the woods just outside the neighborhood, it was our retreat, a place where my family and I could reconnect with nature. The structure was solid, custom-built supports, up-to-date wiring, fire safety measures, and plenty of ventilation. I had spent years earning a professional license in structural engineering, a fact that Karen clearly didn't consider when she walked onto my property with accusations and condescension. Karen had a reputation for overzealous inspections and nitpicking minor issues to exert control over residents. Past complaints had ranged from too tall a fence to lawn edges not straight. But this was different. She assumed that because my cabin was slightly off the conventional HOA aesthetic, it was inherently unsafe. "It looks like it might collapse in a storm," she claimed, pointing to the porch railing as if it were made of paper. I calmly stepped forward. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice even, "I'm a licensed structural engineer. I designed this cabin myself, and it's fully compliant with all building codes and safety standards." Her mouth opened, then closed. She blinked, trying to regain composure. "That doesn't matter. The HOA has rules about safety. You must vacate." I held up my license. "Then perhaps it would be wise to review this before making any claims. I can also walk you through the inspection reports from the city, which all confirm the structural integrity." Her scowl faltered. I could see the realization starting to dawn, a flicker of panic replacing her usual arrogance. She had expected compliance, perhaps a little fear, but not this. Not someone with authority and credentials standing calmly on their own property, prepared to expose her baseless accusations. Over the next hour, she tried to argue, citing obscure clauses in HOA bylaws. I listened patiently, occasionally referring back to my license, building codes, and past inspection reports. Each time she raised a point, I countered calmly, clearly, and respectfully. My neighbors, who had gathered at a distance, watched silently, whispering among themselves. Karen's confidence seemed to shrink with each exchange. The turning point came when I offered to demonstrate the cabin's stability. "Step onto the porch," I said. "Feel the supports, inspect the foundation. I invite transparency. You'll see that the safety concern is not with the structure but perhaps with your assumptions." Karen hesitated. I could see her gripping the clipboard so tightly her knuckles whitened. I need to check with the board," she muttered, retreating slightly. As she backed away, I realized this wasn't just about proving my cabin safe. It was about exposing the HOA's overreach, showing that intimidation and assumptions could be countered with knowledge, patience, and calm authority. I began documenting everything: photos of the cabin, Karen's arrival, my credentials, and her reactions, preparing for the day when the HOA might claim I had defied them. Later that evening, I reviewed the notes I had taken and crafted a strategy. The key wasn't aggression, it was patience. I would let Karen overplay her hand, give her every chance to recognize her error, and then ensure the community saw the truth. The next time the HOA tried to intimidate a resident, they would remember this day, the day Karen froze when faced with real expertise. The next morning, Karen returned, clipboard in hand, clearly expecting a confrontation. This time, however, I had prepared a small gathering of neighbors who were curious about the situation. "Good morning, Karen," I greeted warmly. "I thought it would be helpful if you could see the structure one more time, with witnesses, so everything is clear and transparent." Her eyes flicked nervously to the small crowd. I just need to verify, of course," I said, leading her to the porch. "Step right here. Feel the beams. Inspect the foundation. Ask any questions you like. You'll see, as the city reports confirm, there's nothing unsafe about this cabin. Karen hesitated, then gingerly stepped onto the porch. I watched her carefully, letting her realize that her usual tactics wouldn't work here. It feels sturdy, she admitted quietly, her usual harsh tone faltering. I smiled politely. Yes. And as a licensed structural engineer, I can assure you that every part of this cabin meets or exceeds code requirements. One of the neighbors, Mr. Reynolds, chimed in with a grin. Maybe next time, you'll think twice before lecturing someone who actually knows what they're talking about. The crowd murmured agreement. Karen's scowl deepened, but she said nothing. I decided it was time for the final move. Karen, I appreciate your diligence, but please remember that respect and proper verification go hand in hand. Mistakes in judgment can embarrass the HOA and undermine community trust. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her clipboard. I see your point, she muttered. She knew the entire neighborhood had witnessed her misstep, and the documentation I had prepared left no room for argument. Over the following days, the HOA quietly revised its enforcement practices, making it clear that accusations would now require thorough verification. Karen's reputation for overzealous inspections softened considerably, as residents quietly reminded each other of the incident. My cabin remained untouched, a symbol not just of structural integrity, but of calm authority prevailing over arrogance. That evening, I sat with my family on the porch, sipping tea as the sun set over the treetops. You handled that beautifully, my spouse said, smiling. I was worried it could get ugly. It wasn't about proving a point, I replied. It was about showing that knowledge, patience, and composure win where anger and assumptions fail. Karen froze because she underestimated what respect and expertise look like. Our neighbors, inspired by the event, began to approach me for advice about building projects, inspections, and proper procedures. It was gratifying to see the community empowered and better informed, rather than intimidated by the HOA's prior tactics. Even Karen eventually acknowledged, though quietly, that her initial approach had been misguided. The moral of the story was clear: authority must be exercised with care, knowledge matters, and intimidation is no substitute for competence. By demonstrating both patience and expertise, I had protected my family, my property, and the neighborhood from unnecessary conflict. Over time, the cabin became more than a retreat. It was a reminder to everyone in the community that fairness, preparation, and respect will always outweigh brash assumptions. Karen's frozen expression on that first day of confrontation had become a story shared among neighbors, a cautionary tale for those who might overstep their bounds. I watched my children play nearby, the cabin standing strong behind us. I reflected on the day's lessons: confidence without arrogance, authority used responsibly, and the importance of standing firm when confronted with baseless claims. Knowledge is power, but dignity is the true shield. By the end of the week, HOA enforcement notices were more measured, and the neighborhood felt calmer. Karen had learned, albeit the hard way, that assuming authority without understanding invites embarrassment, especially when faced with someone who knows their rights and responsibilities. The cabin remained safe, admired, and respected. But more importantly, the community had witnessed a quiet victory for fairness and intelligence, proving that the strongest form of revenge isn't anger or spite, it's patience, preparation, and a calm demonstration of competence.